Explosive storms deliver torrential rainfall, catastrophic flooding, and howling winds. In the northwestern Pacific Ocean, these systems are called typhoons. Hurricanes and typhoons rank among Earth's most massive storm systems, and exceptionally powerful typhoons develop in the western Pacific more frequently than many realize. Here, among tropical islands north of Australia, lie some of the planet's warmest waters, fertile breeding grounds for monster storms. By late October 2013, this region had already generated 14 typhoons. Now, unlucky number 15 begins forming, a killer whose name would soon become synonymous with devastation and heartbreaking loss. 8 days before reaching land, Haiyan begins as a tropical depression, a thunderstorm system with winds below 30 miles per hour near Micronesia. The Joint Typhoon Warning Center, operated by the Navy and the Air Force, monitors Pacific storms to protect U.S. military assets. We first noticed a weak disturbance southeast of Pohnpei Island on November 1st. Tropical storms form over water 80 degrees Fahrenheit or warmer. Heat drives evaporation, and as rising vapor cools, it forms clouds, releasing energy as wind and rain. We knew we had warm ocean temperatures underneath with good circulation building up, so this one's going to get pretty big. Over the next 24 hours, the storm system continues growing. Earth's rotation causes the strengthening system to spin counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere. When wind speeds top 30 miles per hour, the center issues its first alert on November 3rd. Computers predicted that Haiyan would continue tracking over unusually thick, warm water, 86 degrees Fahrenheit down to 300 feet, more than enough fuel to fan the flames of a strong storm. On November 4th, Haiyan becomes a typhoon with sustained wind speeds exceeding 75 miles per hour, growing stronger with alarming speed. Within 24 hours, it intensifies by 65 knots, doubling in intensity. At that point, we are tracking it at 130 knots. 130 knots is considered a super typhoon with sustained winds above 150 miles per hour, as destructive as notorious killer hurricanes like Katrina, Andrew, and Camille. With every passing minute, Haiyan continues growing, looking likely to slam into one of the region's most vulnerable targets, the Philippines. More than 7,000 islands, 120,000 square miles of land, about the size of Italy but with nearly double the population. The Philippines faces volcanoes, typhoons, earthquakes, flooding, and landslides, and many people live in extreme poverty. The millions of Filipino people living in coastal communities are accustomed to occasional typhoons. In the days leading up to landfall, most residents take the storm's approach in stride. It is not alarming for us. Everything is just so normal. People are buying, but they are not in panic. But Haiyan is already far stronger than most typhoons, thanks to near ideal atmospheric conditions. Warm air rises through the eye like smoke up a chimney. Wind shear is low, and high-altitude winds create a suction effect at the top of the storm, drawing even more warm air in at the bottom, feeding the storm like a roaring blaze in a well-ventilated fireplace. As the storm reaches peak intensity, atmospheric pressure in the eye drops to one of the lowest levels ever observed. We are able to identify dual-channel outflow, which allows the system to breathe better, grow, and intensify even more. In the Western Pacific, we use the Dvorak method to assess storm strength. On November 7th, our analyst says that we are at 8.0 on the Dvorak scale. 8.0 on the Dvorak scale corresponds to 170 knots, 195 miles per hour. On the afternoon of November 7th, the Philippine Weather Service upgrades the storm signal to Storm Signal 4, the highest possible. But for those on the ground, there is still little tangible sign of what is about to hit. Even at signal number 4, the weather looks very fine. Finally, those living along the coast begin preparations, but they are far from adequate. We start to pack our things and cover everything with cellophane. Haiyan is now almost 300 miles across. As Haiyan approaches land, it becomes very clear that this is a storm of unusual intensity. One reason for alarm: Haiyan is unusually consistent. It intensifies rapidly and maintains that intensity. With ample warm water and undisturbed by wind shear, Haiyan shows no sign of weakening. Right now, it is as big and mean as a cyclone can get on this planet. Winds of 195 miles per hour, gusts up to 240 miles per hour. This storm peaks right as it is going ashore in the Philippines. I tell my wife that this is going to be ugly. People are going to die on this one. At 4:40 a.m. local time on November 8th, Typhoon Haiyan hit the east coast of the Philippines and unleashed a nightmare. Most homes and buildings could not withstand winds of 200 miles per hour. Motorbikes flew through the air, even air conditioning units. Our house was shaking as if the wind was going to uproot it. The wind speeds felt like a moderate to strong tornado passing through, but these winds blew for an hour or two. At 5 a.m., our house was destroyed. Families found themselves exposed to the full fury of the elements. The city of Tacloban on Leyte Island, home to 200,000 people, took the full force. The hospital was threatened. Medical staff moved patients to the basement where we thought it would be safe for us. But now there is a new and far deadlier threat: storm surge. Storm surge is one of the most hazardous aspects of any typhoon. This storm had an incredible amount of water behind it. As this water came on shore, the storm surge was as high as 20 feet. The incredible intensity of Haiyan drove a huge storm surge crashing over the coastline. It was unlike anything people there had experienced. The first water was clear, then we saw the surge, the wind, and the flood. The color was black, blackish water coming. We tried to get patients to the second floor so we would be safe. Almost every typhoon brings flooding, but this was something else entirely. In minutes, the storm surge ravaged the coastline, sweeping away buildings and bringing 20-foot floodwaters. Tacloban sits inside a relatively shallow, protected bay. The shallow, offshore terrain pushed the water up, and the narrow confines squeezed the water, causing it to rise even further. The exceptional thing about this storm surge was the speed at which it came. Storm surges generally build in increments. Hurricane Sandy took 24 hours to push 14 feet of water onto New York and New Jersey. But Haiyan's 20-foot storm surge arrived in just minutes, almost instantaneously, like a tsunami. The devastation was unlike anything we had seen underneath a tropical system before. Then the water came in. Just like that, the water rose to my chest. It was not a normal flood, but a wave coming from the shore. It started at my ankles, then suddenly rose to my chest, then to my neck until I was completely submerged. Rapidly shifting winds offshore caused the surge to come in with tsunami speed. As the rotating storm approached, winds initially blew offshore, pushing water away. Then as the storm passed, winds reversed direction. Water rushed back into the bay, pushed powerfully forward. That produced the sudden, dangerous, and deadly storm surge. The city of Tacloban was inundated. Everything floated like paper, the refrigerator, the TV, everything. They had steeled themselves for high winds and rain, but there was no way they could have foreseen this huge wave of fast-moving water. We never considered the storm surge and the destruction it would bring. It was a combination of incredibly strong winds and massive storm surge. 20 hours after Haiyan makes landfall, great swaths of the Philippine archipelago are devastated. At least 6,000 dead, 1,800 missing, and an estimated 4 million people homeless. Survivors struggle to understand why this storm brought so much suffering. The media, even our weather center, underestimated the surge. They were only monitoring direction, speed, and strength, and they never mentioned the surge. They did not know what a storm surge was. They could have evacuated, but it did not happen. The Philippine Weather Service did predict a large storm surge, but no one expected it would come so quickly. The challenge is predicting just how intense a typhoon will be at landfall. We have a long way to go with storm surge modeling. Surge models depend on coastal geography, wind speed, and direction. In powerful typhoons, those variables change rapidly, making precise prediction extremely difficult. In the immediate aftermath, survivors have no water, food, or shelter. When airports open a day later, aid begins arriving. The American military deploys ships, helicopters, and 7,000 personnel to distribute 300 tons of aid. We are bringing food, water, supplies, shelter, and medicine to everyone we can reach, trying to get to the most urgent needs, typically people isolated on smaller islands, accessible only by boats or helicopters. In the first few days, military experience proves invaluable. The Marine Corps, Army, and Air Force are magicians when it comes to logistics. In the immediate phase after a storm like this, we are trying to rescue people in life-threatening situations and provide care to save their lives. Then the second phase is keeping people safe and alive who survived the initial impact. Because after about 3 days, people who survive but need clean water, antibiotics, and shelter are not surviving. After a few days, the job falls to non-governmental agencies for the longer-term effort. As rebuilding gets underway, questions arise about whether this killer storm links to climate change. Greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide generated by burning fossil fuels are building up in our atmosphere, insulating our planet, holding in more heat, and driving temperatures up. Typhoon Haiyan was not caused by global warming. Global warming could have exacerbated Typhoon Haiyan. Some scientists feel it may not affect frequency, but it may have big consequences for storm intensity. We think there is a relationship between intense storms and climate change, but we do not expect to see that in real data for perhaps another few decades. I cannot tell you which specific home run was caused by steroid use, but during the steroid era, there were more home runs and longer home runs. That is how I frame the discussion about climate change and hurricanes. Any specific typhoon can happen in a given year, but are we loading the dice towards more intense storms as we provide a warmer base of ocean water? Warmer oceans cause water volume to expand. At the same time, glaciers are melting. The result is that sea level around the world is rising. A rising sea level makes these storms far more dangerous because it puts more people at risk with storm surge. The Philippines is one part of the world which has seen the most rapid rise in sea level in the last 20 or 30 years, about 8 inches higher. It is not going to take as powerful a storm surge to create similar damage if sea level is 1 or 2 feet higher 50 years from now. Haiyan's storm surge was a function of wind strength and direction, coastline shape, and underwater terrain, conditions not unique to the Philippines. If that same storm hit the southeastern U.S., it would have been as much a disaster and economically a lot more. One densely settled area that might be particularly vulnerable is Tampa and St. Petersburg on Florida's west coast, home to almost 3 million people. This area has all the factors that could produce a really devastating storm surge. They have a bay that can funnel water. Many hurricanes travel east to west, but twice in 1848, hurricanes traveling northeast made landfall north of Tampa, pushing large surge towards land. Some modelers say you could get storm surge exceeding 20 feet in the Tampa Bay area. If you look at the Tampa area flood defenses, you will see huge subdivisions with expensive homes right up to the waterfront with maybe a 2 or 3 foot seawall. In a major storm surge, those homes would be completely washed away. You need a very specific track to funnel water into that bay. It does not happen frequently, but it has happened before and will probably happen again. That is just one community that may be vulnerable. In an era of rising sea levels, millions of people worldwide may be affected by coastal flooding. Haiyan created one of the worst resettlement crises in recent memory. An estimated 4 million people were displaced, more than twice the number made homeless by the deadly 2004 Indonesian tsunami. In the hardest hit towns, relief efforts would continue for years. The enormity of what happened came crashing down. In the town, sick and injured people flooded into Bethany Hospital. Nurse Paulo Pardea worked tirelessly to save lives, but he had no idea if his own family was dead or alive. Paulo spent 24 hours helping, then walked to his home. It took him a day, and to his relief, his mother and family were all alive. He later said this was the strongest storm he had ever experienced. Paulo's family was spared, but their city had become a disaster zone. Whole neighborhoods were left barely recognizable. Many survivors remain haunted by memories. Carlito Arias found himself desperately holding on to his children as the surge came rushing in. He remembered that his child held on to him, but the next wave separated him from them. That, he said, was the most painful part. Once the storm passed, Carlito searched for the children and relatives he had tried to protect. One by one, he found their bodies. He was left with the task of burying his dead. Many people said they did not think anyone could have dealt with this typhoon because it was so far outside the normal range. Haiyan became as destructive as it did because of a coincidence of very favorable circumstances. It had everything going for it. The people of the Philippines had everything going against them. Among the millions left without a roof are Georgina and her husband. He is using whatever is still usable now. She said they do not have the money to buy materials. She and her husband are hoping that in due time they will be able to start again. Nurse Paulo returned to help those affected. With Tacloban's hospital flooded, relief workers set up a temporary medical center. There is a feeling of joy and of hope in our lives, especially for nurses, because they can continue their work. The Philippine government estimates reconstruction costs around $8 billion. In the affected area, key industries like agriculture and fishing have been destroyed. For people on the ground, it would be easy to be overwhelmed, but the job now is to rebuild. We have no plan to go elsewhere. We will stay here and rebuild whatever we can, because this is our home. The priority for Father Hector is his parish. He said they always have a strong spirit to rebuild in their own simple way. They do not have a roof over their heads, but they will do their best to celebrate Mass. He believes people will come to be grateful to God for their lives. They are hoping that slowly they will make it back to normal. It is a tradition for Filipinos that they never give up in spite of disasters and tragedies. They will not give up. We lost a lot of lives, and that is a fact we have to accept and live with. It will take some time. It is part of the culture that in spite of all the pain and suffering they have endured, they are still smiling.